alien girl was displayed like an animal at the zoo until a human saw her lost kitten eyes. The galactic menagerie on Proxima Station was renowned across 3 star systems as the most comprehensive collection of exotic species in the quadrant. Nestled at the edge of charted space, it attracted visitors from dozens of worlds who came to gawk at creatures they'd never see in their lifetimes. In the East Wing's Endangered Sentience exhibit, behind a nearly invisible barrier of reinforced polyglass, sat Specimen 734. She had a name once, before the collectors came, before her world burned, before she became the last of her kind. The information panel beside her enclosure offered clinical details. Female Nyxarian, approximately 26 standard years, rescued from planetary extinction event, believed to be last surviving member of species. What the panel didn't mention was how the rescue had involved tranquilizer, darts, restraints, and a cage, or how her habitat was a poor facsimile of her homeworld, the artificial humidity making her azure skin glisten unnaturally, the simulated day cycle just slightly wrong. She sat cross-legged on a stone outcropping, her slender fingers tracing patterns in the condensation on the glass. Her long, silver-white hair fell in elaborate braids down her back, contrasting with her deep blue skin. The rough brown fabric of her garment, designed to look authentically primitive for the visitors, barely covered her torso, leaving her shoulders and midriff exposed. The markings on her face, once symbols of her clan's lineage, now merely added to her exotic appeal. The visitors pressed close to the glass, pointing and whispering. Children tapped the barrier, trying to get her attention. She never looked up. "Does it do anything?" a child asked his mother. "It's not an it, dear. The sign says she's a person," the mother corrected half-heartedly, already moving toward the next exhibit. "Doesn't look like much of a person to me," the father muttered. "More like a pretty doll." Jim Praxton heard these exchanges every day. As senior life support engineer for the East Wing, he spent his shifts moving through the service corridors behind the exhibits, checking atmospheric regulators and water recyclers. The Nyxarian's enclosure required particular attention. Her physiology demanded precise oxygen-nitrogen ratios and humidity levels. Today, as he adjusted the humidity controls in the maintenance alcove behind her habitat, he glanced through the one-way observation panel. She was alone for once, the viewing area momentarily empty between tour groups. She looked different, not the vacant-eyed creature he usually saw. She was standing now, her hand pressed against the glass, staring directly at the maintenance panel as if she could see through it, as if she could see him. Jim froze, his hand hovering over the control panel. Those eyes, they weren't wild or threatening. They held a deep cosmic sadness that struck him like a physical blow. The look of an abandoned creature, unsure of its guilt, like a lost kitten, somehow both ancient and innocent. He found himself moving toward the panel, his own hand raising to meet hers through the barrier. Their palms aligned, separated by layers of material designed to be impenetrable. She tilted her head slightly, her silver-white eyebrows drawing together. With her free hand, she began tracing symbols in the condensation, intricate, flowing patterns that seemed strangely familiar. The moment shattered as the next tour group entered the viewing area. She immediately withdrew, retreating to the far corner of her enclosure, resuming her vacant stare. Jim stood motionless in the darkness of the maintenance alcove, his heart pounding. What had just happened? Had she actually sensed his presence? And those symbols, why did they seem to tug at some buried memory? He shook his head, trying to clear it. He was being ridiculous. She couldn't possibly have known he was there. The observation panel was completely opaque from her side, and yet, as he gathered his tools, he found himself glancing back. She was tracing the symbols again, this time in the soil near her feet, hidden from the visitor's view. And though he couldn't explain how he knew, he was certain they were meant for him. Jim couldn't sleep that night. The symbols the Nyxarian had traced haunted him, dancing behind his closed eyelids. By 0300 hours, he'd given up on rest and sat at his small desk in his quarters, sketching what he remembered on his datapad. The curves and angles seemed to shift as he drew them, as if resisting capture. Yet something about them tugged at his memory, like a half-forgotten lullaby from childhood. He accessed the station's database, searching first for information about Nixarian language. The entry was sparse. Written communication system unknown, verbal language unrecorded due to subject's non-cooperation. Non-cooperation, Jim snorted, as if refusing to perform like a trained animal was some kind of offense. On impulse, he switched to Earth's historical linguistics database. He scrolled through ancient scripts, Sumerian, Proto-Sinaitic, Linear A, until his finger froze above the screen. "Holy shit," he whispered. There it was. Not an exact match, but unmistakably similar to what she'd drawn. A variant of Proto-Elamite script, one of humanity's earliest writing systems, dating back nearly 5,000 years. How was this possible? Her world was 17 light-years from Earth. Their species had never encountered each other before first contact just 30 years ago. Unless everything they'd been told was a lie. Jim downloaded everything he could find on Proto-Elamite and ancient Earth languages. By the time his shift began, his eyes were bloodshot, but his mind was racing with possibilities. He moved through his maintenance rounds on autopilot until he reached the East Wing. The Nixarian's enclosure was his last stop. He checked the corridor, empty, before slipping into the maintenance alcove. She was there, sitting cross-legged near the observation panel, as if waiting for him. When he entered, her head tilted slightly, though she couldn't possibly see him. Or could she? Jim hesitated, then tapped gently on the panel. Her eyes widened, focusing directly on the sound. She moved closer, placing her palm against the barrier. Heart pounding, he placed his hand against hers. Through the one-way glass, their eyes met. "I know you can sense me somehow," he whispered, although she couldn't hear him. "And I think I understand some of what you've been trying to tell me." He pulled out his data pad and held it up to the panel, displaying the Proto-Elamite script he'd found. Her reaction was immediate. She gasped, her free hand flying to her mouth. Then she began tracing rapidly in the condensation, her movements urgent. Jim recorded her symbols, comparing them to his research. Not identical, but the patterns were clear. Both writing systems shared a common ancestor. "This changes everything," he murmured. "Our species must have some shared history." A maintenance alert chimed on his comm unit. Damn. The atmospheric regulator in the Arcturian exhibit needed attention. He had to go. "I'll be back tonight," he promised, though she couldn't hear him, "when the visitors are gone." As he turned to leave, she pressed both hands against the glass, her eyes pleading. The thin fabric of her garment shifted, revealing more of the markings that spiraled across her skin. Markings that, he now realized, resembled the same ancient script. For the rest of his shift, Jim could think of nothing else. The connection between their species, the mystery of how they shared a writing system, and most of all, her eyes when she'd recognized the symbols on his datapad. For the first time since he'd seen her, there had been something besides sadness there. Hope. That night, after the last visitors had departed and the night cycle began, Jim returned to the East Wing with his toolkit and a small device he'd modified from spare parts. A rudimentary, two-way communicator that could be attached to the maintenance panel. The corridors were dimly lit, patrolled only by occasional security drones. He'd timed their patterns over the past weeks and knew he had a 7-minute window. When he reached the maintenance alcove, she was waiting, sitting close to the panel. As he entered, she rose gracefully, moving toward him with an eager step. Jim worked quickly, attaching his device to the panel's edge. It would vibrate the barrier itself, allowing sound to pass through without compromising the structural integrity that would trigger alarms. "Can you hear me?" he whispered when it was in place. Her eyes widened. "Yes," she replied, her voice accented but clear. "I hear you." The sound of her voice sent an unexpected shiver through him. It was melodic, with tones that seemed to resonate somewhere in his chest. "My name is Jim," he said. "Jim," she repeated, the name sounding different, almost musical in her mouth. "I am Lenira." "Not Specimen 734?" he asked with a small smile. Her expression darkened. "That is not my name. That is my prison number." "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean—" "I know," she interrupted, her expression softening. "You are different from the others. You see me." The way she said it made his heart race. There was something in her gaze that went beyond gratitude, a warmth, an intensity that made him acutely aware of her as a woman, not just a prisoner. "The symbols you've been drawing," he said, trying to focus, "they're similar to an ancient human writing system." "The old tongue," she nodded. "From before the scattering." "The scattering?" "When the Cedars took our ancestors from the first world and planted them across the stars." Her fingers traced one of the markings on her forearm. "These tell our history, how we came from the same cradle as your kind." Jim felt lightheaded. "You're saying humans and Nixarians share a common ancestor? That we were transplanted by some advanced species?" "Yes. The stories say we were one people, once." Her eyes met his, something vulnerable and yearning in their depths. "Perhaps that is why I felt drawn to you. Why I could sense you, even through this barrier." The security drone's approaching hum interrupted them. Jim checked his timer. He'd stayed too long. "I have to go," he whispered urgently, "but I'll come back tomorrow night." "Promise?" The naked hope in her voice made his chest tighten. "I promise." On impulse, he pressed his lips to the panel where her hand rested on the other side. As he slipped away, the warmth of her smile stayed with him, along with the revelation that would change everything he thought he knew about humanity's place in the universe. The next morning, Jim arrived early for his shift and determined to learn more about the menagerie's true purpose. He'd spent half the night researching the proto-Elamite connections, and what he'd found disturbed him. Throughout human history, there were unexplained technological leaps, mysterious artifacts that seemed too advanced for their time, and ancient texts describing sky people who shared knowledge with early civilizations. What if those weren't myths? He accessed a maintenance terminal in a quiet corridor, using his engineering credentials to dig deeper into the menagerie's secure files. Most were encrypted, but he found an unprotected folder containing intake records for new specimens. His blood ran cold as he read Lanira's file. "Specimen 734, Nixarian female, acquired following controlled extinction event on Nixar Prime. Subject exhibits dangerous knowledge of pre-scattering history. Recommended for a memory suppression before public display." Controlled extinction event, not a natural disaster, not an accident. Genocide. His hands trembled as he continued reading. There were notes about maintaining species separation and preventing knowledge contamination. One memo specifically mentioned keeping human and Nixarian specimens isolated from each other. Genetic memory activation risk too high. Previous incidents resulted in an undesirable awakening. Jim downloaded everything he could find to his personal device, then carefully erased his access logs. His mind raced as he went through his morning tasks. The menagerie wasn't just a zoo. It was a containment facility designed to keep the truth buried. By midday, a new alert appeared on the staff bulletin. Security upgrades scheduled for East Wing. All communication systems to be enhanced with neural pattern detection. Neural pattern detection? They would be able to detect unauthorized conversations, including his and Lanira's. When he reached the East Wing for his afternoon checks, he found Director Threll, the menagerie's imposing Vordaxian administrator, inspecting Lanira's enclosure. The tall, gray-skinned alien was flanked by security personnel. Engineer Praxton. Threll's translator device rendered his clicking speech into flat standard. "Your atmospheric controls for this specimen have been exemplary." "Thank you, Director," Jim replied, keeping his expression neutral despite the disgust rising in his throat. "Just doing my job." "Indeed." Threll's compound eyes gleamed. "We've noticed some anomalous readings from this enclosure. Vibrations in the barrier material. Most curious." Jim's heart hammered. "Could be a fault in the humidity regulators. They sometimes cause resonance in the polyglass." "Perhaps." Threll didn't sound convinced. "We'll be installing new monitoring equipment tonight. No need for maintenance staff to concern themselves with it." "Understood, sir." Inside the enclosure, Lanira sat motionless, her expression blank. But her eyes tracked Jim as he moved, a barely perceptible acknowledgement. "Fascinating specimen," Threll commented, noticing Jim's gaze. "The last of her kind. Such a tragedy." "Yes," Jim managed. "A tragedy." "Did you know," Threll continued conversationally, "that her species once claimed to share ancestry with humans?" Absurd notion, of course. Humans evolved independently on Earth, as all properly educated people understand. It wasn't a casual comment, it was a test. I've never heard that theory, Jim lied. Sounds far-fetched. Indeed, such dangerous misinformation could cause unrest. Threll's translator couldn't convey emotion, but the threat was clear. We'll leave you to your work, Engineer Praxton. As they departed, Jim pretended to check the atmospheric controls while his mind raced. They suspected something. The security upgrade would be installed tonight, the same night he'd promised to return to Lanira. He had to warn her, and he had to do it now. Waiting until the corridor was clear, he slipped into the maintenance alcove. Lanira immediately moved to the panel, her eyes questioning. They know, he whispered urgently through the communication device. They're installing new security tonight that will detect us talking. Her eyes widened with fear. What will happen to you if they discover? Don't worry about me, he cut in. But I found files. Lanira, they deliberately destroyed your world, and they're hiding the truth about our shared history. She closed her eyes, pain etching her features. I suspected as much. My people's memories spoke of this possibility. I'm going to get you out of here, he said, the decision crystallizing as he spoke. Tonight, before the new security is installed. How? Her palm pressed against the barrier, and he matched it with his own. I don't know yet, but I will. The intensity of his determination surprised even him. I can't leave you here. Something shifted in her gaze, the sadness giving way to a warmth that made his pulse quicken. Jim, she said softly, among my people, when two souls recognize each other across the void, it is called the resonance. I felt it the moment I sensed you watching me. I felt it too, he admitted. I thought I was going crazy. Her lips curved into a smile that transformed her face. Not crazy, just awakening to what your kind has been forced to forget. A warning chime from his comm unit broke the moment. I have to go, but I'll be back tonight with a plan. As he turned to leave, she called after him. Jim, in my culture, when two beings share the resonance, they are already joined in the ways that matter most. The implication sent heat rushing through him. Their connection wasn't just intellectual or emotional, it was something deeper, more primal, something their bodies recognized, even before their minds understood. Then I'm coming for my other half, he promised. As he hurried away, Jim knew he was risking everything. His job, his freedom, possibly his life. But the alternative, leaving Lanira imprisoned, letting the truth remain buried, was unthinkable. Tonight, he would break every rule to free her. And in doing so, perhaps free humanity from a lie that had persisted for thousands of years. Jim worked with controlled urgency in the maintenance bay, modifying a portable atmospheric regulator to serve a very different purpose. His hands moved with practiced precision despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. You're here late, Praxton, called Technician Morales from across the bay. Jim kept his voice casual. Got a pressure fluctuation in the Taurian exhibit. Thought I'd fix it before tomorrow. Always the overachiever, Morales chuckled, gathering his tools. Don't stay too late. Those new security upgrades are happening at 0200. Thanks for the reminder, Jim replied, waiting until Morales left before slipping the modified regulator into his pack, alongside a maintenance uniform he'd procured for Lanira. His plan was simple but dangerous. The modified regulator would create a cascading failure in the environmental systems of the North Wing, a home to non-sentient specimens that could withstand temporary atmospheric changes. The resulting alarms would draw security away from the East Wing, giving him time to override Lanira's enclosure locks. At 1300, the menagerie was eerily quiet. Jim moved through the service corridors with practiced ease, avoiding the regular patrol routes. When he reached the North Wing junction, he activated the modified regulator and set it on a maintenance shelf. Within minutes, warning lights flashed as the atmospheric systems began to malfunction. Emergency protocols kicked in, and he heard the heavy footfalls of security personnel rushing toward the disturbance. Now, for the hard part, Jim sprinted through the back corridors to the East Wing. At Lanira's enclosure, he found her waiting, eyes alert. She'd gathered her few possessions, a small carving she'd made from stone, a length of fabric woven from plant fibers in her habitat. "Ready?" he mouthed through the glass. She nodded, determination replacing the sadness he'd first seen in her eyes. Jim accessed the maintenance panel and began the override sequence. His fingers flew over the controls, bypassing security protocols he'd studied for weeks. The barrier between them hummed as the locking mechanism disengaged. With a soft hiss, a section of the polyglass slid open. Not the main viewing panel, but a maintenance access point large enough for Lanira to slip through. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the physical barrier between them gone for the first time. Then Lanira stepped forward, crossing the threshold from captivity to freedom. "Here," Jim whispered, handing her the maintenance uniform. "Put this on." As she quickly pulled the coveralls over her minimal clothing, Jim couldn't help but notice the graceful lines of her body, the way the markings on her skin seemed to shimmer in the dim light. She caught his gaze and smiled, a knowing, intimate expression that made his heart race. "The resonance grows stronger without barriers. Hush, she murmured, her voice sending a pleasant shiver through him. "We need to move," he said, reluctantly focusing on their escape. "The diversion won't last long." They slipped into the service corridor, Jim leading the way toward the maintenance docks where supply shuttles arrived. If they could stow away on the outgoing waste reclamation shuttle. An alarm blared, different from the environmental alert he triggered. "Containment breach detected. East Wing, Section 12. All security personnel respond." "They've discovered you're missing," Jim hissed, pulling Lanira into a narrow utility closet as heavy footsteps approached. The space was barely large enough for one person, let alone two. Lanira pressed against him, her body warm and supple. In the darkness, he could feel her breath against his neck, the rapid beat of her heart matching his own. "Your heart," she whispered, placing her hand on his chest. "It beats like mine." "More evidence we're not so different," he murmured. Her fingers traced up to his face, exploring his features with gentle curiosity. "In darkness, I see you more clearly," she said. "Your spirit shines." The footsteps passed their hiding place, but neither moved to leave. Something electric hung in the air between them, a tension that had nothing to do with their danger and everything to do with their proximity. "Lanira," Jim breathed, his hands finding her waist. "Yes," she answered, understanding the unspoken question. "The resonance calls us to join." Her lips found his in the darkness, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. The kiss deepened, and Jim felt a strange sensation, as if something dormant within him was awakening. Memories not his own flickering at the edges of his consciousness. Ancient star maps, vast ships crossing the void. The feeling of being torn from home, scattered across the cosmos. He broke the kiss, gasping. "Did you?" "Feel it," she finished. "The memories. They come with the resonance. Our bodies remember what our minds were made to forget." Another alarm sounded, breaking the moment. "We have to keep moving," Jim said reluctantly. They slipped from the closet and continued their journey through the maintenance tunnels, hands clasped tightly. Each touch between them seemed to strengthen the strange connection, images and sensations flickering between them without words. When they reached the maintenance dock, Jim quickly located the waste reclamation shuttle, a small automated vessel that made weekly runs to the processing station in the outer system. "It leaves in 10 minutes, he explained, opening a service hatch. "The cargo hold has atmospheric containment. We can hide there until we reach the station." "And then?" Lanira asked, her silver-white eyebrows drawing together. "Then we find transport to Earth," Jim said, the plan forming as he spoke. "There must be others who know the truth, or who will awaken to it when they meet you. We can expose what the menagerie is doing." Lanira touched one of the markings on her forearm. "My people believed that when the scattered children of the First World reunited, the Cedars would return." "One step at a time," Jim smiled, helping her into the shuttle's cargo hold. "First, let's get off this station." As they settled into the cramped space among the sealed waste containers, Lanira curled against him, her head resting on his shoulder. The intimacy of the gesture felt both new and somehow ancient, as if their bodies remembered a closeness their minds had forgotten. "When we're safe," she whispered, her fingers tracing patterns on his palm that sent heat coursing through him, "I will show you how my people celebrate the resonance." The promise in her voice made his breath catch. "I look forward to the cultural exchange," he replied with a smile she felt, rather than saw in the darkness. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, and they held each other tightly as the vessel detached from the station, carrying them away from captivity and toward an uncertain future. Together. The waste reclamation shuttle hummed steadily as it carried them through the void. Jim and Lanira had made themselves as comfortable as possible in the cramped cargo hold, nestled between sealed containers. The dim emergency lighting cast a soft blue glow over Lanira's skin, making her appear almost luminescent. "How long until we reach the processing station?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, despite the fact that no one could hear them. "About 6 hours, Jim replied, checking his portable terminal. "We should be—" A sharp alarm cut him off, followed by an automated announcement. "Course alteration detected. Returning to point of origin. Security protocol Alpha 9 engaged." "Ah, damn it," Jim hissed, scrambling to access the shuttle's control interface through his terminal. "They've remotely overridden the navigation system." Lanira's eyes widened with fear. "They're bringing us back to the menagerie." "Not if I can help it." Jim's fingers flew over the interface. "I need to bypass the remote control protocols and take manual command of the shuttle." "Can you do that?" He flashed her a confident smile that belied his inner uncertainty. "I'm a life support engineer, not a pilot. But right now, I'm the best shot we've got." As Jim worked to hack the shuttle systems, Lanira moved closer, watching intently. Her proximity was distracting in the most pleasant way, the subtle scent of her skin, like rain-soaked earth, and something sweetly alien, filled his senses. "The markings on your arm," he said, partly to focus his thoughts. "You said they tell your history?" She nodded, tracing one of the intricate patterns that spiraled from her wrist to her elbow. "Each line represents a generation. The symbols tell of our journey from the first world, our struggles, our triumphs." "They're beautiful," he murmured, meaning it. A faint blush darkened her blue cheeks. "Among my people, only bondmates would speak so intimately of each other's markings." "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "No," she interrupted, her fingers brushing his arm. "I welcome it. The resonance between us. It feels right." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Jim forgot about the shuttle, the danger, everything except the connection between them, a pull as inevitable as gravity. The terminal beeped, breaking the moment. "I'm in," he said, refocusing on the screen. "I've overridden the remote commands, but they'll notice soon. We need to change course." "To where?" "Not Earth. That's the first place they'll look." Jim studied the navigation chart. "The processing station is still our best bet. We can blend in there, find new transport." He plotted a course that would take them to the station via a longer route, hopefully confusing their pursuers. As the shuttle's engines adjusted to the new heading, a violent shudder ran through the vessel. "What was that?" Lanira gasped, steadying herself against his shoulder. Jim checked the diagnostics. "They've activated the emergency thrusters remotely, trying to force us back on course." Another shudder, stronger this time, sent them tumbling against each other. Jim found himself bracing Lanira against the wall of the cargo hold, their bodies pressed together in the confined space. The sudden intimacy of their position sent heat coursing through him. "I need to disable those thrusters," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. Lanira's eyes held his, something primal and knowing in their depths. "Do what you must. I trust you." The simple declaration struck him more powerfully than he expected. How long had it been since anyone had trusted him so completely? Working one-handed, unwilling to release her in the unstable shuttle, Jim managed to access the thruster controls. With a few precise commands, he shut down the emergency system. The shuttle stabilized, now firmly under their control and heading toward the processing station. "You did it!" Lanira breathed, her lips tantalizingly close to his. "We're not safe yet," he cautioned. "When we reach the station, we'll need new identities. The workers there are mostly Trilaxians and Vordaxians, all loyal to the menagerie's administration. How will we hide? My appearance is distinctive." Jim considered this. The station processes waste from dozens of worlds. It's a transit hub for all sorts of species. If we can get you different clothing, maybe alter your appearance slightly. Among my people, bondmates share a ritual that temporarily transfers markings, Lanira said thoughtfully. If we were to join, some of my markings would appear on your skin, and mine would fade somewhat. It might help disguise me. The implication hung in the air between them. Jim swallowed hard. This ritual, it's like a marriage ceremony. More primal than that, she explained, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest that sent shivers through him. It's a recognition of the resonance between souls. The physical joining is merely an expression of what already exists. And the markings, they're temporary? They fade after several cycles unless the bond is renewed. A small smile played at her lips. It's considered quite pleasurable to renew them. The temperature in the cargo hold seemed to rise several degrees. Jim was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, of the soft curves pressed against him. Would you want that? He asked, his voice husky. With me? In answer, Lanira's hand moved to the nape of his neck, drawing him down until their foreheads touched. An intimate gesture from her culture. Since the moment I sensed you watching me, she whispered, I've felt the echo of something ancient between us, as if my soul recognized yours across time and space. Their lips met, and this time the kiss deepened immediately, years of loneliness and longing pouring into the connection. Jim felt that strange sensation again. Memories not his own flickering through his mind, but stronger now, more vivid. A vast ship among the stars. Thousands of humans and Nixarians living together. The Cedars watching, experimenting, separating. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Lanira's eyes shimmered with emotion. You saw it too? He nodded. Our peoples weren't just related. We lived together, traveled the stars together. Until the Cedars separated us, scattered us across different worlds, she finished. The menagerie continues their work, keeping us apart, hiding the truth. Jim stroked her cheek, marveling at the softness of her skin. Not anymore. Not for us. In the dim blue light of the cargo hold, as the shuttle carried them toward an uncertain future, they created their own small rebellion against millennia of enforced separation. Their bodies spoke an ancient language that transcended words, recognizing each other with a certainty that defied their different worlds. Afterward, Jim stared in wonder at the faint blue markings that had appeared on his skin, delicate whorls and symbols that matched Lanira's, though hers had indeed faded slightly. It worked, he murmured, tracing the patterns on his forearm. Lanira smiled, nestling against him. The ritual always works when the resonance is true. A notification from his terminal interrupted their moment of peace. We're approaching the processing station, Jim said, reluctantly disentangling himself. Time to see if our disguise works. As they prepared to dock, dressing in the maintenance uniforms and gathering their few possessions, Jim caught Lanira studying him with an expression of wonder. What is it? He asked. In all the stories my people tell of the scattering, she said softly, there is a prophecy that when the children of the first world reunite in body and spirit, the truth will spread like fire among the stars. Jim took her hand, feeling the weight of history and possibility between them. Then let's go start a fire. The processing station loomed before them as their shuttle docked, a massive utilitarian structure of interlocking metal rings spinning slowly against the backdrop of a gas giant. Waste from 100 worlds was sorted here, recycled and redistributed across the sector. Remember, Jim whispered as they prepared to disembark, keep your head down. The hood should hide your ears and hair. If anyone asks, you're a mixed-species technician from the outer colonies. Lanira adjusted the maintenance uniform, pulling the hood forward to shadow her face. The bonding ritual had worked better than expected. Her distinctive facial markings had faded to subtle patterns that might pass for decorative tattoos, while Jim now bore faint blue whorls on his forearms and neck. What about you? She asked, touching one of the markings on his skin with gentle fingers. I'll say they're cultural tattoos from Earth's southern continent. He caught her hand, pressing a quick kiss to her palm. Ready? She nodded, her eyes, those same lost kitten eyes that had first captured his attention, now shining with determination rather than sadness. They stepped off the shuttle into the cavernous docking bay, joining the flow of workers and automated cargo units. The processing station was a hive of activity, with dozens of species moving purposefully through its corridors. Perfect for blending in, or so they thought. "Attention all personnel," an announcement echoed through the station. "Security alert in effect. Report any suspicious individuals to the nearest security checkpoint. Particular attention to human male and Nixarian female traveling together." Jim tensed, guiding Lanira toward a less crowded corridor. "They're faster than I expected." "They must have anticipated our destination," she murmured. They needed a new plan. The passenger shuttles to the outer colonies departed from the station's upper ring, but security would be watching those areas closely. "This way," Jim decided, leading her down a maintenance shaft. "We need to find somewhere to regroup." As they descended into the lower levels of the station, the corridors became narrower, the lighting dimmer. The recycling and waste processing areas were largely automated, with fewer workers to notice them. "Jim," Lanira whispered suddenly, pulling him into an alcove. "Look." A security detail was moving through the corridor ahead. Not the station's regular guards, but a specialized unit in sleek black armor. At their head was a tall, gray-skinned figure Jim recognized immediately. Director Thrall. "He came himself," Jim breathed, pressing back into the shadows. "This is personal for him." They watched as Thrall gestured to his team, deploying them in different directions. His translator device carried his clicking speech to their hiding place. "The human will attempt to reach the colony shuttles. The female is merely following. Her species is naturally submissive to stronger beings." Lanira stiffened beside him, indignation flashing in her eyes. Jim squeezed her hand in warning. Now wasn't the time. "Remember," Thrall continued, "the human must be taken alive for memory extraction. The Nixarian is expendable, the last of a failed experiment." When the security team had moved on, Lanira turned to Jim, her expression fierce. "Submissive? Failed experiment? My people were warriors and scholars before the cedars scattered us." "He's trying to provoke us," Jim realized. "He knows we might be listening." "What do we do now? They're blocking our escape route." Jim considered their options. The station had hundreds of maintenance tunnels and service corridors, his specialty, but Thrall would have studied the station schematics too. "We need to think like humans, not like fugitives," he said finally. "That's what they won't expect." "What do you mean?" A slow smile spread across his face. "Humans are adaptable, creative, and we have one advantage Thrall doesn't understand." "The resonance?" "Exactly." He touched one of the blue markings on his arm. "Since our bonding, I've been getting flashes, not just memories, but knowledge. Technical information about systems I've never studied." Lanira's eyes widened. "The genetic memory transfer. It's stronger than I expected." "Strong enough to help us hack into the station's communication system?" he asked. "Perhaps. What are you planning?" "Something audacious," he grinned. "Something human." They made their way deeper into the station's maintenance levels, evading security patrols through Jim's knowledge of life support systems and the strange new intuition he'd gained from their bonding. Finally, they reached a small control node, one of dozens that managed the station's internal communications. "Keep watch," Jim told Lanira as he began working on the access panel. His fingers moved with surprising confidence, accessing systems he'd never trained on. It was as if part of him had always known how to do this, perhaps a skill from some ancient ancestor, preserved in his DNA and awakened by the resonance. "How much longer?" Lanira whispered, glancing nervously down the corridor. "Almost there." Jim made a final adjustment. "Got it." He'd gained access to the station's announcement system and security camera network. Now for the audacious part. "What exactly are we doing?" Lanira asked. "Creating chaos," he replied, programming a series of contradictory security alerts to different sections of the station. "And then we're going to walk right out the front door." "That seems unwise." "Trust me." He pulled her close, their foreheads touching in the intimate gesture she'd taught him. "Humans excel at being unpredictable." Their lips met briefly, the connection sending another pulse of shared memory between them. This time, a flash of ancient humans and Nixarians fighting side by side against some unseen enemy. When they separated, Lanira's eyes held new understanding. "Your people were our protectors once. And we will be again, he promised. Jim activated his program. Throughout the station, alarms began blaring with conflicting messages. Security breaches reported in multiple locations. System failures in others. On the security feeds, he watched as Threll's forces scattered, responding to phantom threats. Now, Jim said, taking Lanira's hand, we walk out calmly like we belong here. They emerged from the maintenance levels and joined the confused workers heading toward emergency assembly points. In the chaos, 2 more maintenance workers attracted no attention. As they approached the upper ring where passenger shuttles waited, Jim felt Lanira tense beside him. What is it? He asked. Threll, she whispered. He didn't fall for your distraction. He's waiting by the shuttles. Jim followed her gaze. Sure enough, the Vordaxian director stood watching the crowd, his compound eyes scanning each passing face. He's smarter than I gave him credit for, Jim muttered. What now? Jim studied the docking bay. There were 3 passenger shuttles preparing for departure. 1 to the mining colonies, 1 to the agricultural world Terrace 2, and 1 to a luxury resort moon. All would be watched. But there was a 4th vessel, a small private yacht with the menagerie's insignia on its hull. Threll's personal transport, Jim realized, the last place he'd expect us to go. Can you pilot it? Jim touched one of the blue markings on his neck, feeling the ancient knowledge stirring. I think we both can. They changed direction, moving casually toward the private docking bay. As they approached the yacht, a security scanner activated, requiring identification. This is where it gets tricky, Jim murmured. But Lanira stepped forward confidently, placing her palm on the scanner. As the blue markings on her hand seemed to pulse, and to Jim's astonishment, the scanner beeped in acceptance. How did you… The Cedars built all these systems, she explained as the yacht's entry ramp descended. And they built us. Some connections remain if you know how to access them. They hurried aboard, sealing the hatch behind them. The yacht's interior was luxurious, and clearly designed for a high-ranking official's comfort. Can you start the engines? Lanira asked as Jim took the pilot seat. Working on it. His hands moved across the unfamiliar controls, guided by that strange new intuition. Through the viewport, they saw Threll notice his yacht powering up. The Vordaxian's mandibles flared in what must have been shock or rage as he sprinted toward them, security forces in tow. Jim! Lanira warned. Hold on! The engines roared to life, and Jim disengaged the docking clamps. The yacht lurched free just as Threll reached the bay, his alien features contorted with fury. As they accelerated away from the station, Lanira laughed, a sound of pure joy that Jim had never heard from her before. We did it! She exclaimed, her eyes bright with exhilaration. Not yet, Jim cautioned, checking the navigation system. We still need to get somewhere safe, somewhere we can tell our story. Lanira leaned over, pressing a kiss to his cheek. Set course for Earth, she said. It's time for your people to remember who they really are. As the yacht jumped to faster-than-light travel, Jim pulled Lanira onto his lap, holding her close as the stars streaked past. No longer a specimen behind glass, no longer a lost kitten. Now she was his equal, his partner, and together they would rewrite history. Earth loomed before them, a blue-green jewel against the blackness of space. Jim had never seen his homeworld from orbit before. Few humans had the privilege of space travel in a galaxy dominated by other species. It's beautiful, Lanira whispered, pressing her hand against the viewport, just as the ancestral memories showed me. They'd spent the 3-day journey studying the yacht's database, discovering that Threll had been monitoring Earth for decades. The files contained locations of what the Vordaxians called dormant nodes, ancient structures humans had built as megalithic monuments, but which were actually sophisticated cedar technology in disguise. Stonehenge, the pyramids, Easter Island, Jim mused, reviewing the list. All those archaeological mysteries, they're actually communication hubs. Waiting to be activated, Lanira confirmed. The Cedars left them as a way for us to reconnect once we were ready. Their plan was audacious: land near the Great Pyramid, activate the dormant node, and broadcast the truth about humanity's origins across the planet. The shared genetic memories would awaken in humans worldwide, breaking the millennia of enforced separation. But as they began their descent, The yacht's sensors blared a warning. "We've got company," Jim growled, checking the display. "Threll's flagship. He must have taken a faster route." "Can we outrun him?" "Not in this yacht, but we can outmaneuver him." Jim's hands flew over the controls, the blue markings on his skin pulsing with ancient knowledge. "Hold on." He sent the yacht into a steep dive, skimming the atmosphere at a dangerous angle. The heat shields glowed red as friction built up around them. "Jim!" Lanera gasped, clutching the console. "Trust me," he grinned, the thrill of the chase lighting his eyes. "This is what humans do best. Improvise." The yacht shuddered as Threll's ship fired warning shots across their bow. Jim juked and weaved, using Earth's atmosphere to create a fiery trail that confused the flagship's sensors. "We're going to land in Egypt," he told Lanera. "The Great Pyramid is our best chance." As they broke through the cloud cover, the ancient monument came into view, its limestone casing long gone, but its essential structure intact after thousands of years. "There!" Lanera pointed to a flat area near the pyramid complex. "That's where the activation point should be." Jim brought the yacht down hard, the landing struts barely extending in time. They tumbled from their seats as the vessel skidded to a halt, throwing up a cloud of desert sand. "Are you okay?" he asked, helping Lanera to her feet. She nodded, her silver-white hair coming loose from its braids. "We need to hurry." They grabbed the equipment they'd prepared, a makeshift interface Lanera had built using components from the yacht, designed to connect with the ancient cedar technology. As they emerged onto Egyptian soil, the blazing sun momentarily blinded them. When Jim's vision cleared, he saw a sight that made his blood run cold. Threll stood before them, flanked by 6 armed guards. The Vordaxian director's compound eyes gleamed with triumph. "Engineer Praxton," his translator rendered in that flat mechanical voice. "And Specimen 734. How predictable that you would come here." "Her name is Lanera," Jim said, stepping protectively in front of her. "Names are irrelevant. You are both property of the menagerie now." Threll gestured to his guards. "Take them." "Wait," Lanera called out, her voice carrying a strange resonance that made everyone pause. "Director Threll, do you know what the cedars really were?" The Vordaxian's mandibles twitched, the equivalent of a frown. "The cedars are myth, a story primitive species tell to explain their origins? Then why do you fear this place?" She gestured to the Great Pyramid looming behind them. "Why have you monitored these structures for centuries?" Threll's compound eyes narrowed. "Enough. Secure them." As the guards advanced, Jim felt something strange beneath his feet, a vibration in the earth itself. The blue markings on his skin began to glow faintly, matching a similar glow emanating from Lanera's more elaborate patterns. "Jim," she whispered urgently, "the node is responding to us, to our bond." Understanding flashed between them without words, another gift of the resonance. Together they pressed their hands to the sandy ground, the blue markings on their skin flaring brighter. The earth trembled. Threll and his guards stumbled back as the ground before the pyramid began to shift, sand pouring away to reveal a smooth metallic surface embedded in the bedrock. "Impossible!" Threll hissed. "No," Jim replied, helping Lanera to her feet. "Inevitable." Hand in hand, they approached the exposed panel. It was inscribed with the same symbols Lanera had traced on the glass of her enclosure, the ancient script their peoples had shared before the scattering. "What happens now?" Jim asked softly. Lanera smiled, the sadness that had haunted her eyes completely gone. "Now we remember. Together." They placed their palms against the panels simultaneously. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Light erupted from the Great Pyramid's apex, shooting skyward in a brilliant blue column. Similar beams appeared across the globe as other dormant nodes activated. Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, Angkor Wat, Easter Island, all responding to the awakening of the first. Jim gasped as knowledge flooded his mind. Not just memories now, but understanding. The Cedars hadn't been alien manipulators. They had been humans and Nixarians themselves, advanced beyond recognition, who had traveled back through time to ensure their own evolution. A temporal loop, preserving their existence across the cosmos. Threll screamed, his translator unable to render the alien sound of desperation. "Stop them!" but his guards stood transfixed, their weapons forgotten as the blue light washed over them. Across Earth, humans were experiencing the same awakening. Memories of stars, of voyages, of a shared destiny with beings they had been taught to see as alien. "The Vordaxians," Lanira said, understanding dawning in her eyes as she looked at Threll. "They weren't our enemies. They were our caretakers, tasked with keeping us separate until we were ready to remember. And they forgot their purpose," Jim finished. "Became jailers instead of guardians." Threll sank to his knees, mandibles clicking rapidly as the blue light penetrated his exoskeleton. "The compact," his translator managed. "We were bound by the compact to keep the timeline intact." "The timeline has fulfilled itself," Lanira said gently. "The circle is complete." Around them, the air shimmered as if reality itself was shifting. In the distance, they could see crowds gathering, drawn by the column of light. Humans looking skyward with new awareness in their eyes. "What happens now?" Jim asked, holding Lanira close as the blue glow began to fade from the pyramid. "Now humanity remembers its true potential," she replied, "and its cousins among the stars." In the days that followed, Earth transformed. The awakening spread like wildfire, humans everywhere experiencing the genetic memories of their shared past with the Nyxarians. The revelation that humanity was not alone, had never been alone, changed everything. Threll and the other Vordaxians, freed from their misinterpreted duty, revealed the locations of other Nyxarian survivors. Hundreds hidden throughout the galaxy, preserved like Lanira in various menageries and research facilities. 6 months later, Jim stood with Lanira on a hillside overlooking the Great Pyramid, now humming with activity as humans and newly arrived Nyxarians worked together to fully activate the ancient network. "I still can't believe you were the last of your kind," he said, tracing one of the markings on her arm, now permanently shared between them after multiple renewals of their bond. "I never was," she smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Just as you were never just a maintenance engineer. We were always meant to find each other, to remember together." "From specimen in a cage to savior of two species," Jim mused. "Not bad for a girl with sad eyes." "They weren't sad," Lanira corrected him, her gaze now filled with love and mischief. "They were waiting for someone to truly see me." As the sun set over the ancient monument, now revealed as a beacon of advanced technology, Jim kissed her under the darkening sky. No longer separated by glass, by species, or by forgotten history. In the distance, the first of the new ships rose into the atmosphere, a joint human-Nyxarian venture, bearing the symbols of both peoples. The children of the First World were going home to the stars together at last. And it had all begun with a human male who saw beyond the exhibit glass, into the lost kitten eyes of a girl who wasn't really alien at all.